It's been a while. So, Metroid Dread has been out a while now, and I've beaten the game on both normal mode and hard mode, and I was waiting to do all of that before fully giving my thoughts to you in video form. And I apologise to anyone who's been eagerly waiting to hear my thoughts, but I think I'm finally ready to do a review on this game. There won't be any spoilers in this. I'll save the spoiler talk for another video down the road. This video will not have any spoilers outside of what was shown in the trailers and stuff. This game was absolutely worth the wait. Oh my god, it's everything you could love about Metroid. It's everything you could ever want. Quick, fast-paced gameplay, really thrilling, immersive atmosphere, apprehension, a sense of empowerment, and a satisfying payoff. It's all there. I guess I will start with the gameplay first of all. It's so smooth. The gameplay is incredible. The controls and how Samus operates. It's some of the best controls I've ever experienced in a video game. It's so smooth, so responsive, there's no delay. It's literally right as you press the button, she does exactly what you want her to do at every single time. It's incredible, it really is. And I accidentally speedran the game when I was first playing it. I beat it in 7 hours, which wasn't my intention, but the gameplay is so fast and fluid that I couldn't slow down because it just didn't feel natural. It felt natural to go with this fast-paced motion. Prior to this, Zero Mission for me had the best movement of any Metroid game, at least of the 2D games anyway. Just how fast and snappy she was, and I always wanted them to sort of expand upon that, and they really did with Dread. They dialed that up to 11. Her movement speed is so fast and quick, she's so agile, and it's just like the acrobatics she can do, everything. It's so incredible and smooth. You never lose track of her amidst the environments. It's stunning to look at, and it feels so satisfying to play, especially with the HD rumble. When you're parrying those enemies, you really feel the oomph from it as well, just in the Joy-Cons, if you're using a Pro Controller as well. You really feel the impact, and it's really satisfying to just blast enemies away right after parrying them like that. These as well, you've got pretty much everything returns from the previous 2D Metroid games, as well as some new abilities, and they all work so beautiful in tandem. The speed booster, it's so satisfying to like pull off and just wall jump and just continue your momentum and just shoot across entire chunks of the map. It's so thrilling. That's the best way I can describe it. It's so thrilling to pull off, and the reward you get when you pull off those shine sparks, you really feel like the most badass person in the galaxy after pulling off some of those tricks. Some of those puzzles are really, really tricky, but when you pull them off, it feels cathartic. It really does. Speaking of difficulty, oh my god, this is one of the most difficult Metroid games. It's not quite as difficult as Federation Force or the original Metroid, so I'd say it's the third most difficult Metroid game, but definitely the most difficult of the 2D games if we're not counting the NES game. It's so difficult, but it never feels unfair. The game is so challenging and you will die a lot, but you can recognize where your failures are at. It's easy to die and see, okay, this wasn't the game's fault. That was my stupid mistake I made there. I can correct that next time. And when you go at that tricky boss a second or third time, it really does sort of build up that in your head, the patterns you have to learn and the speed at which you have to dodge attacks. As the messages on screen say, like, nothing is impossible in this game. It is really difficult, but it's so satisfying. The payoff, when you get things right, when you beat that boss that's been giving you so much trouble, and most of them will give you a lot of trouble. A few in particular, you know the ones, will give you so much trouble. But when you learn their attacks, when you start managing them, and when they no longer feel difficult, when they start feeling more manageable, it's the best feeling. I've never had this feeling for the most part with other games, especially other Metroid games. It feels so nice to play. Like, the other Metroid games have all aged really fine, but compared to Dread, with how advanced and sleek and modern it is, it's going to be very hard to go back to any of the old games because everything just flows so nice, so modern. It's everything you could want gameplay wise. And I'm so glad that there's that challenge because most of the 2D Metroid games have been pretty easy. And even the Prime games, to an extent, they sort of maintain the same level of difficulty. But Dread, for newcomers, it would be particularly tricky. But even for fans, I think when you get over that learning curve and you master those little tricks, it ingrains itself in your head and you feel so empowered. Speaking of empowerment, nothing feels quite as empowering as when you master those quick time events with bosses. There's some controversy around this, but I think they're amazing. It's not too difficult compared to quick times in other games. Bosses make it pretty clear what you need to do and when in terms of parrying and quick time. But when you master and you go into this rushing animation of just grabbing the boss and just pummeling them with missiles, it feels so badass. You feel so immersed, like you're there in the moment, like you are Samus trying to take down this massive monster. It feels so goddamn good to just do those quick time events and master those parries. I also want to give a lot of credit to the sound design in this game. Not enough people are talking about this. The sound design and the music in this game is incredible. It's not the best Metroid soundtrack, it's not the most memorable, but it works really well. It's immersive, it's ambient. Some of the tracks are memorable, but not to the extent as, like, let's say, Brinster and Super Metroid or anything like that, but they work pretty well. I don't think people are giving them enough credit. It's so immersive. When I started up the game for the first time, I played with headphones on, handheld, and I got that full experience. Right when you start off the gameplay for the first time, you feel like the music is bombastic and it's like swallowing and overwhelming you, and as you go through the game and you feel like everything feels so tense and suspenseful, like there's so much suspension. And then when you go into the Emmy zones, that rides up to 100, which, speaking of the Emmy zones, like a lot of people, I was worried these wouldn't hold up, that these could get annoying and that they wouldn't give you the sense of dread. They do. They most certainly do. Within that first Emmy, after the tutorial, when I went to that first Emmy door, I was already thinking to myself, not this shit again. When you go through there, you're immediately thinking, where's the Emmy? Like, it really hits you that, like, there's no place you can hide. You're trapped in here with this thing and you need to get out of there as soon as possible. The tension and the music in those Emmy zones is just absolutely masterful, and your heart really sinks when you start hearing those little beep 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 boop 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 sounds, and you just see the red dot on your map just getting closer. The dread and the apprehension really does intensify. And during the chases as well, like, it never gets old as well, because each Emmy is so different from each other as well. It never feels repetitive. You never really know what you're going to expect with each Emmy, and some of them, there's two in particular that are like really tough to get around. And when you finally do, when you get those central units and you get the Omega Cannon and you get to take down that Emmy that's been giving you so much trouble, it's cathartic, just blasting it away and knowing you're done with that one Emmy. It's beautiful, really. It really is masterful. It's this amazing build-up of tension and anxiety, and when you finally get the ability to fight back, it's empowering. You really do feel, it feels incredible. You feel amazing. You feel like Samus, like you're taking out this incredible threat that's been giving you so much hassle for the past few moments, and here you are now ready to be rid of it. The payoff is incredible with those Emmy zones. And the way they move as well, the Emmy's movements are very sort of graceful and elegant. Not a lot of people are pointing that out, but it really is sort of entrancing to watch how they sort of contort and twist themselves around as they move up and around the different ledges. The AI on them as well is really remarkable. They're very clever. I was going through one zone and I was about to climb up a spider magnet wall, but the enemy behind me jumped up on a ledge and then ended up coming down the wall in front of me and cornering me, and I was really impressed when that enemy killed me because it was very clever. Makes me wonder how different would these enemies have been had Metroid Dread released on the DS like it was supposed to. Really makes you think. The maps, the backgrounds, everything. The level design is fucking gorgeous. The backdrops, they feel massive, especially those like pan-out shots where you go into a new area and it sort of pans out and Samus looks tiny compared to these gargantuan caverns behind you with all these huge trees and pillars and canyons. You're left in awe. You really are, because it just feels alive in a way that none of the other 2D Metroids have. I've loved the style of the other games because they're obviously the sprite artwork and stuff, but Metroid Dread has the benefit of its more realistic style, which allows the environments to come to life in a way they never did before. It's so impressive, and you could get hypnotized staring at these backgrounds forever, because there's always so much going on. Birds flying around in between different trees, or little creatures and insects scurrying across the rocks. It's beautiful, it really is. And the diversity of environments as well. Each area is so different from each other, but they all work really well. You have your, like a lot of Metroid games, of course, you have your traditional fire, jungle, rocky kind of areas, but just like every time, they're so different and distinct from everything that's come before that they stand out in every way. And the environments that are unique to this game world as well are just incredible. I don't want to spoil any of them for you, so I'm not going to go in depth about what any of those environments are, but I'm sure anyone who's played the games will know some of the later ones I'm talking about are just stunning to look at, especially with the background and the huge caverns, and you have like the sunlight coming through. It's, oh my god, even thinking about it, it really is beautiful. Enemies, the general enemies you encounter, all brand new. There's none that have come back from the previous games, no Gamers or Shriekbacks or anything like that. They're all new enemies. They're fine. It feels good to parry them. Their designs are all unique and stuff, but I wouldn't say they're as memorable as the enemies in previous 2D Metroids. That could be because we've seen a lot of the same enemies come back in every single game, whereas these are all brand new for the most part. So I guess from that point of view, that's to be expected, but they get the job done, and some of them will give you a lot of trouble. A lot of robotic enemies, as you've seen like the trailers and stuff, the Chozo robot enemies. The combat is so advanced with those. Like, I knew when I saw like the second trailer, I think it was, when we first got introduced to those Chozo robots, that the game would be challenging and difficult, and it is. When you're fighting off against those things, especially if you're fighting off against two of them at the same time, it's so difficult. But there's one ability in particular, I think it's safe to say what it is because it was in the trailers. The Storm Missile, probably the best upgrade in all of Metroid. It's your best friend in this game because it just takes enemies out so quickly. Because you feel so stripped and powerless at the start of the game because you just lost everything. The music is overwhelming and you feel alone and helpless, like everything can kill you in 2 hits. But as you get your abilities, you power up, and especially when you get the Storm Missile, it completely revolutionizes combat because you can do so much by throwing so many missiles at enemies all at once, taking out multiple enemies. For that reason, it's the best upgrade in all of Metroid. I think it's essential to this game, and I would hope they bring it back for future games because it's incredible. If they can tweak the Seeker missiles in Metroid Prime 4 to be like this, that would be incredible. Speaking of, actually, it reminds me of sort of the camera views, as I mentioned earlier. this is a 2D game, but there's cinematics where you're switching between like over-the-shoulder shots to first-person views, and from that perspective, it's very immersive, but it can kind of give you a glimpse of what to expect from Metroid Prime 4, which is really neat, I think. But back to what I was saying about the combat, when you get the Seeker missiles and you pummel those robots with it, it's so satisfying. The payoff is just amazing. You feel so powerful. You feel like you're journeying with Samus, like you're getting stronger as she is. And what more can I say about it? It's beautiful. This game is a masterpiece, hands down. There's so much to love about it. You'll notice the title of this video says it's a flawed masterpiece. That's what I'm going to get into here. It's the story. Unfortunately, and without spoiling it obviously, the story in this game is very poor. Very vague. There's not a lot of there's some really cool moments. I should preface this by saying this. There's some really cool, surprising moments that will leave you jaw drops and that will have you rethinking the Metroid lore. There were moments, you'll know the ones if you played the game, that I sat there and I was like, oh my god, like this is amazing. Especially like relating to Samus herself. Like there's some really cool, neat details there that are just jaw-dropping and badass. But overall, on the grand scheme, the story could have been better. It's very vague. There's nothing really explained. There's a lot of contradictions to Metroid Fusion. And like the ending, badass. Finale, that whole like showdown, the end was badass, but the ending itself just, I guess in typical 2D Metroid fashion, it just sort of stops. Sakamoto claimed we would have a clear idea of where the story was going after this when we beat Dread. I have no clue. Dread doesn't give you any indication of like what the next game is, where the story's going next. Everything just sort of ends in Dread. I don't think it works as a conclusion because it doesn't feel like a conclusion. But there are some good moments in the story. It's not the worst story ever, of course not. It's an enjoyable story, and it's crafted in such a way that both fans who've been playing this for 20 years and people who've never touched a Metroid game before can understand. Everyone's looking at the same thing, and we can all look at each other and go, okay, I know what's going on. I know all the factors that are at play here. There's no sort of confusion there, which I have to give credit for. That aspect of the story is really brilliantly done. But because of the story, because it's so vague and not as in-depth as I'd hoped, I have to subtract points away for that. If it wasn't for the story, this probably would be the best Metroid game. But because the story kind of fails to impress me on a large scale, it's not the best Metroid for me here. Now, in terms of my ranking, I've been thinking a lot about this over the last couple of days. I don't know, to be honest. I know this is one of the higher Metroid games on the list, but I don't know where I can put it, to be honest. I might have to do a different video on that, but for now I really don't know. This game is phenomenal, it's fantastic, it's a masterpiece. But, see, my favourite Metroid game is usually whatever one I'm playing in that moment. Metroid 2, Zero Mission, all three Prime games, they're all pretty high on the list, so where Dread ranks in comparison to those, tough to say. I don't know if it's the best, but it's definitely one of the best. And that's not to knock it. It's a fantastic game, it's worth the wait. But it's not a perfect game. It's not 100%, it's 99%, which no game can be 100%, so at least there's that. I think it's the best it could be with what was done with it. To add anything else on the end here, there's not really anything else to add on top of it. This game is phenomenal. This is the Metroid game we have been waiting for. This is the game we wanted announced in 2015, in 2017, and in all the E3 since. And I loved Federation Force, by the way, I might add that. But this is the game we wanted each of those times. Metroid Dread, it was the game that symbolized hope and what could be the best Metroid game for a lot of us, and it is that. I think it does really well at what it was trying to do. It has everything you could want from a Metroid game in there. There is a focus on story, not as much as I would have liked, but there is a focus. So it has story, it has fluid gameplay, it has fantastic environments, sound design, art design, just everything about it is just stellar. There's so much to love about this game. I'm going to be gushing about this for weeks and months to come, and I'm going to do about 100 more videos on this in the next coming days and weeks ahead. So for now, to end this little review off, go buy Metroid Dread if you've ever been curious about this game. It's fantastic. You can get into this if this is your first Metroid game. If you've never played any others, don't worry, you can get into it. As I said, the story catches you up to date. It's very easy and simple to understand. You'll know what exactly is going on. You won't be confused. Having the knowledge of previous Metroid games helps, but going into this blind, I think this probably is the best Metroid game to recommend to people. A lot of people recommend, Zero Mission or Super Metroid or Prime, but I think going forward, Dread is the best Metroid game to recommend to newcomers because it catches people up to date, because it's so advanced and modern. Because it's so modern, newcomers aren't going to have that frustration of it being an older game limited by technicalities. It's so advanced and modern, I think newcomers can appreciate it for everything that it is. So yeah, Metroid Dread, an absolute masterpiece. I am so happy this game exists, so thankful to Nintendo, and I have to give praise to Mercury Steam as well. They may have butchered Samus Returns, but what they've done with Dread is just, it goes beyond what words can say. People are not exaggerating in all the reviews when they say this game is incredible. It really is, and I urge you to play this game for yourself if you haven't already. But for me, I'm going to end that here. That was my non-spoiler review of Metroid Dread. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. Have you played Metroid Dread yet? What do you think of it? What was your favorite aspect of it? Where does it rank in terms of your favorite other Metroid games? I want to hear everything you have to say down in the comment section below. And yeah, with that all said, see you next mission.